All of my life, I was always struggling to pay bills and keep a roof over my head. People just didn't seem to want to hire me. So I was always moving from job to job, and I was barely earning enough to even feed myself. So when my doctor offered me $50K to test something on my body, I said yes. But hold up, let me start from the beginning. Before I go on, please be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more awesome videos. My doctor wasn't exactly like your average doctor. Dr. Harrison was pretty shady and always seemed to be doing experiments that were probably illegal in some countries. Whenever I arrived in her office, she always had some weird stain on her clothes, probably the result of a failed experiment. One time, I went to a checkup only to find she had bright neon pink hair. She told me a potion she had been working on had backfired, and now she had permanent pink hair. Some people might have ran away at the sight of her, especially since she was their doctor, but I wasn't too bothered, and she was nice enough, so I was fine with her treating me. One day, I asked her about her experiments. She explained all the sorts of things she was doing. She was trying to make ice cream that reversed the effects of aging, to the point where your 50-year-old face could revert to a 10-year-old's. She was also working on some kind of pill that allowed you to change the tone of your voice. So if you wanted to sound high-pitched or low-pitched, or sultry or nerdy, you could do so by taking a type of pill. Honestly, all of these sounded pretty sketchy to me. I wasn't so sure if she could even accomplish something like that, but Dr. Harrison assured me she was very close to succeeding in one project. I call it Project Love, she told me. I'm on the verge of a breakthrough. I was intrigued. Really? I asked, what is Project Love? Well, I've designed a sort of chip, a bug that can be inserted into your body, she said. It then ejects a certain scent that is similar to what you feel when you're in love. In other words, it makes people love you. I was immediately interested. Well, for starters, my dating game has never been good. Actually, at the time, I had never had a girlfriend. That's right, never. So when Dr. Harrison spoke of a bug that could make people love you, I was immediately on board. I know, some people may say this was unjust, as you're tricking people into loving you, but I was desperate. Hey, actually, Michael, said Dr. Harrison, I need someone to experiment my latest version of the bug. Would you be willing? I was about to say yes, but then I hesitated. Actually, it probably wouldn't be a good idea. I didn't know Dr. Harrison that well, and I didn't know how safe her testing would be. No, I don't think that's a good idea, I said. I'll pay you $50,000 if you do it, she said. Well, that settled it for me. Okay, I agreed. And that was that. I was going to get tested with a love bug. Now, that wasn't the smartest of choices, and trust me, it might have been one of the biggest mistakes of my life. The same week, Dr. Harrison called me in for the Project Love testing, and I went to her office. She put me under, and by the time I woke up, I had the love bug in me already. Dr. Harrison showed me an x-ray, and I was shocked to find it was located very close to my heart. It kind of scared me to think a piece of metal was inside me. Dr. Harrison made me sign a form to basically rid her of any consequences, and she transferred the $50,000 straight to my account. I was so happy. I had $50,000. And not only that, if this thing worked, I would finally be loved. A part of me also wondered what may happen if this turned out to be another one of her failed experiments, but I shrugged the thought away. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything. I went home and honestly didn't really feel that different. I was curious to see who would be affected by the love scent. When I walked down the street, no one looked at me differently. Maybe it hadn't worked. But there was one person that I really hoped would be affected by the love scent. I had a coworker at this fast food restaurant I worked at, and she was so cute and kind, and I was really into her, but I always believed I was too poor to get her attention. Well, if this test worked, I wouldn't need to worry about getting her to love me. Sure enough, that day, I asked her out, and she said yes. Lola seemed to really like me too. The testing had worked. I was supposed to check in with Dr. Harrison the next day for another checkup, but I skipped it so I could go on a date with Lola. Big mistake. Well, Lola and I had a great time on our date. We went to the carnival and we played all sorts of games, and I was completely smitten by her. I hope she felt the same way about me. I was pretty sure that the love bug had worked though. Dr. Harrison would be so happy. But when I got back home, I saw Dr. Harrison had called me 42 times. I felt my stomach drop like a stone. Oh no, this can't be good. My heart was beating like crazy. Maybe something had gone wrong with the experiment. Maybe she was mad I had missed out on our scheduled checkup. I took a deep breath and called her back. "Hello?" I said. "Michael," came Dr. Harrison's voice on the phone. "Where have you been? You missed your checkup." I know, I'm sorry. What's wrong?" "You shouldn't have done that. The love bug scent has multiplied now. That checkup was supposed to stop the effects of the bug. Now everyone will be in love with you." I hung up because I saw something that made my knees weak. I was standing in the kitchen as I spoke to Dr. Harrison on the phone, but as I looked out the window, I spotted a swarm of women heading my way. There was a crowd of them, at least 20 women, all running towards me. I locked the doors, but they wouldn't leave. I ended up having to call the police, and after much persuasion and threats of arrest, they managed to get the women to go. I stayed home the whole day. The next morning, Lola had called to ask if I wanted to hang out again. I guess the only reason she asked was because of the love bug, but I was really into her, so I didn't mind. I agreed, and we scheduled to meet at the mall. When I met up with her, women started to chase me around, and I couldn't get anywhere without women coming to say hi or get my number. It was crazy. This wasn't what I wanted. Lola was put off by all these women, and even when I told them I was dating someone already, they didn't seem to care. A lot of men pursued me too. I wasn't attracted to men, but it seemed they were attracted to me. My life was miserable. I was conflicted too. The test was definitely not worth the $50K, but without it, I never would have gotten Lola. She was the only good thing in my life as of now. But now I couldn't go anywhere without being harassed by women and men. It was horrid. I tried to find Dr. Harrison to ask her to give me an antidote or something, or maybe reverse the effects of the testing. But when I arrived at her office, she was missing. Her assistant told me she had disappeared suddenly. They had no clue where she went. That's when I realized I was trapped with this stupid bug in me. I decided I had no hope but to try and find Dr. Harrison. Using some of my $50K, I hired a private investigator to find Dr. Harrison, and eventually they located her on some remote island in the Caribbean. I booked the first available flight, and Lola said she wanted to come too, so we hopped on a plane within a few hours. It was even worse on the plane. I had nowhere to escape the people who felt they were in love with me. Luckily, it was a short flight, but by the end of it, I had given my number to every woman on the plane, even some who were over 60 years old. Lola was so surprised by how many people were attracted to me. I apologized to her over and over again, but she said it was fine. "It's not your fault," she said. I felt guilty because it was my fault. I had chosen to have the test for Project Love. There was no one to blame for this but me. Finally, we arrived on the island, and Lola and I rushed to the location the private investigator had told me. Apparently, Dr. Harrison was staying in some resort on the coast. We got a taxi to the resort, and we tried searching for her. Eventually, I spotted her lounging by the pool. It was quite easy considering she had neon pink hair. I asked Lola to stay behind so she wouldn't hear about my secret test. Dr. Harrison didn't even seem that surprised to see me. I asked her why she had left, and she said that she was wanted by the FBI. Apparently, she had done a bunch of illegal experiments that broke a number of laws in several states. When I asked her to fix my problem, Dr. Harrison told me that because I had missed my checkup before, the effect of the drug had multiplied to a point that was over the top. She said the effects were permanent. She could take the bug out, but the deal was done. I would forever have people falling in love with me. There was no hope. I sat down, defeated. "It's just," I said, "there's this girl, Lola, and I really love her. But I want her to love me for me, not because of this stupid love scent." "Her?" asked Dr. Harrison. She pointed to Lola, who was waiting patiently to the side. "That's strange." "What?" I asked. "She doesn't seem completely in love with you." "What do you mean?" Dr. Harrison scratched her chin as she thought. "Would you let me do some tests on her?" "What? No way." "Relax, I'm not doing anything wrong. I just want to check something." Before asking, she called Lola over and explained everything to her. She told Lola about my test, about the love bug inside me, about everything. I was shocked. I was so scared Lola would cry and dump me, then and there. But to my surprise, she accepted, and let Dr. Harrison test her. Suddenly, Dr. Harrison pulled out a blood sample taker. Did she carry her medical supplies with her everywhere? And took a tiny drop of blood from Lola's finger. She inserted it into a test tube, dropped another purple-colored liquid, and nodded. Said Dr. Harrison, just what I thought. What? I asked. Lola is immune to your love bug. What? I exclaimed. But then I smiled with glee, because suddenly I realized what this meant. Lola really loved me. I apologized to Lola for almost tricking her into loving me, but she was completely fine. She said she understood what it was like to feel unloved. But I do love you, she said. I love you too, I cried. Finally, we kissed, and Dr. Harrison was laughing at us. But I didn't care, because finally I had found someone who loved me. But there was still the problem of the love bug. I decided I had to move to a really rural area where no one could be near me and smell my love scent. Despite my protests, Lola said she wanted to live with me too. We're living together now and life is great. But this is a lesson for you guys. Whatever you do, don't let some random doctor, or anyone for that matter, do a shady experiment on you. Take it from me, it isn't worth the money. My sister and I never really got along. She's 5 years older than me. I wanted to be her friend, but she was so mean to me. You won't believe the mean things she has done to me. But before I go on, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more crazy stories. It all started the day I was born. Mom and Dad rushed to the hospital the morning I was born. My sister Louise stayed at home with my grandma. Later in the afternoon, Grandma brought Louise to see me. She took one look at me and said, "It's a boy." "Yes," smiled Mom and Dad. "Meet your baby brother Joe." "But I don't want a baby brother," wailed Louise. "I want a baby sister." From that moment on, she never let me forget that she wanted a baby sister. Whenever I tried to play with her, she would tell me to go away. "You can't play this game," she would say. "This game is only for girls." Louise sometimes had her friends over to our house to play. They would go into her bedroom and shut the door so I couldn't come in to play. One time, Louise was playing tea party with her friends. She had plates with cookies and glasses of lemonade. I wanted to play too. I pushed the door open so hard that I tumbled into the room and fell on top of the plates and glasses. Louise started shouting and crying. Mom came running upstairs. "Oh, what have you done, Joe?" she asked. "He's ruining everything, Mom," cried Louise. With that, Mom picked me up and took me downstairs to sit in the room with her. It wasn't fair. I told Mom I was only an accident, but she didn't believe me. Sometimes Mom would ask Louise to play with me while she made dinner. I was so happy, but Louise didn't speak to me. She just put the TV on and ignored me. Louise had lots of friends because she went to a big school with a lot of students. I couldn't wait to start school. Then I would get lots of friends too. Finally, the day came. My first day at school, I woke up early and ate my breakfast. Mom told Louise and I to get into the car while she locked up the house. As we waited for Mom, I smiled excitedly at Louise. "Don't think you're going to hang around with me and my friends," said Louise. Mom got into the car and we drove to school. When we arrived at the school gates, Mom said to Louise, "Make sure you look after Joe." "Yes, Mom," replied Louise, smiling at Mom. But as soon as we went around the corner, Louise ran off to her friends and left me all on my own. I felt scared and I didn't know where I was supposed to go. Why was Louise so mean to me? I couldn't help being a boy. At lunchtime, I went to see if I could find Louise. She was sitting with a group of her friends in the corner. They were laughing and looked to be having so much fun. As I went towards them, Louise pointed and said, "That's my little brother. He's such a baby." Her friends all started laughing at me. I felt the tears welling up in my eyes. From that day on, I made sure I stayed away from Louise and her friends at school. By the time we were both in high school, Louise and I didn't really speak to each other at all. She spent all her time in her bedroom. I didn't know what she did there, but she was very secretive. One time, I walked into her room and she was writing in a book. As I came in the room, she hid the book under her pillow. "What do you want?" she shouted meanly. "Get out of my room!" I couldn't stop thinking about that book. I wondered what it was she didn't want me to see. One Saturday morning, I had my chance. Louise had been invited to sleep over at her friend's house the night before. Mom had gone shopping and Dad was outside doing some gardening. I slipped into Luis's room and started looking around for the book. I couldn't see it anywhere. Then I remembered. She had hidden it under her pillow. I ran over to her bed and lifted her pillow. There it was. I opened the pages and started reading. It was her secret diary. Most of it was pretty boring. Of course, she complained about me a lot in it. But then I hit the jackpot. I turned the page and read the words. I think I'm in love with Jake Brown. I started laughing to myself. Boy, she was going to regret being mean to me at school. I couldn't wait to go to school on Monday and tell everyone what I'd read. Monday morning came, and Louise was being her usual mean self on the way to school. She was telling me how boring I was and how she was so cool. I didn't really care. I smiled to myself as I walked into school. As soon as I got in, I started telling everyone that Louise was in love with Jake Brown. It wasn't long before the whole school was talking about it. Everyone started teasing Louise. When we got home from school, Louise ran straight to her room and slammed the door shut. I heard her crying, but I didn't really care. After all, she had done lots of mean things to me. And anyway, she had no idea it was me that had told everyone. It was about 2 weeks later when I came home from school to find Louise on her computer with her bedroom door open. As I walked past, she smiled at me and called out, "Hey, Joe, come in here." I was surprised, but I went into her room. "Have you heard the news about this new virus going around?" she asked. "No, what is it?" I replied. She started to tell me all about this strange new virus. "It gets inside your body and starts eating you from the inside out," she told me. It sounded terrifying. I hope I don't catch that virus, I thought to myself. I didn't want something eating away at me. I was a growing boy, or that's what my mom was always telling me. I had always had a good appetite, but recently I was eating a lot more. That night, we sat down for dinner. It was Mom's homemade spaghetti. I loved it. I piled a huge pile of spaghetti onto my plate and started munching away while watching TV. I looked down at my plate. That's strange, I thought. I've eaten that huge plate of spaghetti, but I still feel hungry. The same thing happened the next night, and then the next. I was eating so much food, but I never felt full. Then my heart sank. I suddenly realized why I was so hungry. I must have caught the virus. What was I gonna do? But then surely there could be another explanation. Of course, I was a teenage boy. Everyone knew that teenage boys were always hungry. I laughed to myself. I was fine. The next morning in class, I was daydreaming about the huge burger I was going to have for my lunch when my best mate Mike whispered to me, "Have you seen the new girl?" "No," I replied. "I'll introduce you at lunchtime," he said. The lunch bell rang and we raced down to the school cafeteria. We bought our burgers and looked around for a table. "Over there," said Mike, pointing at a table where 2 girls were sitting. We walked over to the table and the girls looked at us. "This is Julie," said Mike. "She's the new girl." I looked at Julie and was about to say something when I felt it. The blood drained from my face and my heart skipped a beat. I had felt something moving inside me. Oh no, it was true. I had caught the virus. I left my burger and ran from the table. I was panicking. I couldn't eat my dinner that night either. All I could think about was this virus inside of me. I told Mom I was really tired and wanted an early night. I went up to my room and lay on my bed. It wasn't long before I had drifted off to sleep. Suddenly, I woke up. It was the middle of the night and I could hear a strange noise. Something had woken me, but what was it? That's when I realized the sound was coming from inside me. It was as though I could hear something eating away inside of me. I couldn't get back to sleep. I just lay in bed listening to the strange sound. That's when I knew I had to do something about it. The next morning, I told Louise all my fears. I told her everything that had happened to me and she agreed. It definitely seemed like I had all the symptoms of the virus. I would have to go to the doctor. "Oh, you don't need to go to the doctor," said Louise. "I have a portable x-ray machine. We can see inside your stomach." Louise went and got her machine. I thought it was strange that Louise would have an x-ray machine, but I was desperate to see what it would show, so I ignored the concern. She pointed it at my stomach and my face fell. There, clear as day, you could see this strange object moving inside my stomach. That's it, I thought. My life is over. I told Mom that I wanted to go see the doctor. I told her that I had caught a virus and something was eating away at me from inside. At first, she thought I was joking, but once she saw that I was serious about it, she said she would make an appointment for me. We went to the doctor's office. I told him all about my symptoms. "Okay, let's take a look at you," the doctor said. The doctor listened with his stethoscope to my stomach. He couldn't hear anything unusual, but I convinced him that he should take an x-ray. After the x-ray, we sat in the doctor's surgery. The doctor looked at my mom. "I think Joe may be suffering from stress," he said. "The x-ray's all clear. There's nothing wrong with Joe." Mom looked relieved, but I knew the doctors had missed something. I knew I couldn't just accept this fate. I needed to do something about it. I started researching how to kill something inside you. I couldn't actually find any information on this virus, but I knew that my only chance would be to poison it. I didn't tell anyone, but I decided I was going to make my own poison. I started collecting all the things that I would need to make my poison. The day came when I decided I could take it no longer. I was in my room plucking up the courage to swallow the poison when Louise came up the stairs. She barely glanced at me, but I wanted to tell her what I was about to do. "I'm going to kill the virus by drinking this poison," I told Louise. I picked up the glass of poison and put it to my lips. I was about to swallow it when Louise shouted, "No, Joe, don't drink it. You haven't got a virus. It was me all along." I looked at Louise questioningly, and that's when she told me the truth. "It was me that ate all your food," she said. Louise went on to explain that the reason I was still hungry was because she had been sneaking the food from my plate when I wasn't looking. She had found out that it was me that told the whole school she loved Jake Brown. She wanted to get a revenge. "But I felt it moving inside me when I saw the new girl," I said. Louise smiled. "That's just butterflies," she said. "Everyone gets those when you see someone you like." "And I heard it in the middle of the night," I went on. "I put a sound machine under your mattress," Louise explained. "I'm sorry I've been so mean to you." I was so shocked by this sudden turn of events, but I had to admit, it was also wrong of me to tell her crush that she liked him. "I'm sorry I told everyone your secret," I replied. Louise smiled. "It's okay. I think we're even now, don't you?" I nodded and we hugged. After that, we got along just fine.
Hi, I'm Sally, and I'm not your typical girl. I have 3 sisters, Sophia, Sharon, and Sandy. Yes, my parents thought it would be cute to have all our names start with the letter S. Frankly, I find it annoying. We're quadruplets, meaning we were all born at the same time. We're very close. Oh, yes, and did I mention we were conjoined quadruplets? Before I go on, please make sure you like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more crazy videos like this. My parents weren't expecting quadruplets. When my mom was pregnant, she never did any ultrasounds. She said she preferred the gender of the baby to be a surprise when she gave birth. Little did she know she would have 4 babies, and she never would have expected to have conjoined quadruplets. When my parents got to the hospital, they were shocked when the doctors told them they were having quadruplets. My mom said she almost fainted from the shock. They had to believe they would only have 1 baby. And sure, they could tell my mom's belly was pretty big. I mean, of course it was. She had 4 human beings in there, but they hadn't really thought about it that much. So when the doctor told them they were having quadruplets, well, they freaked out. It was too difficult for my mom to give birth naturally, so they had to do a cesarean. When my mom woke up after the surgery, that's when the doctors dealt the news. They had conjoined quadruplets. My mom said she was shocked. She was so stunned by the news. She felt guilty because she said she felt as if this were her fault somehow. But when she saw us and the doctors placed us in her arms, she made a vow to make our lives as amazing as possible. She loved us to bits. Our dad wasn't as forgiving. He abandoned us. He left my mom on her own to raise 4 children. I will never forgive my dad for that. Never. I prefer to just ignore him. Of course, growing up, we had our challenges. For starters, going to school was a nightmare. Kids could be really mean sometimes, and the fact that my sisters and I were conjoined didn't help anything. We got bullied each and every day of our lives, but we got through it. We had our sisters and mom to depend upon for support. Some people might think it's really hard for us to live our daily lives, but really, it's not that hard. This life is all we've ever known. We've been conjoined since birth, so it's normal for us. Sure, getting ready in the morning can be a bit difficult since everyone is trying to be quick, and our bathroom can feel cramped sometimes. But other than that, things are relatively smooth. We each carry a mirror with us so that we can talk to each other easily, and also when we watch TV so that we can see the screen. But then again, sometimes I feel annoyed when others complain about such little things, like having to share the same room as a sibling. Imagine having to share the same body with 3 of your sisters. But we learned to live with being conjoined, and we were happy. But then Sophia did something that ruined everything. You see, we all pretty much live different lives, but we just happen to have the same body. We have different crushes, different interests, and we're all pretty different people. I'm the more serious one, and I tend to focus a lot more on doing homework and studying. Sharon is a lot more outgoing, and she's very friendly too. Sandy is more quiet, and she can get very shy. And Sophia? Well, Sophia is quite crazy. She gets really aggressive sometimes, and she always seems to want to pick a fight. I suppose it was because of this tendency to fight that she ended up ruining our lives. Sophia had grudges, and there was this one girl at school who she really hated. Now, don't get me wrong, this girl, her name was Katie, was mean. Like, meaner than your average bully. We were used to the insults growing up. I mean, we're conjoined quadruplets for Pete's sake. But Katie was something else. She seemed to devote her life to making us miserable. Katie was a new kid in our class, and I remember when she first walked into the classroom, she had stared at us and screamed out loud, "It's a monster!" Now, the other kids in our class were pretty used to us, and I guess you can understand you might be shocked to see a person with 4 heads. But Katie didn't stop there. She had proceeded to call us names and said that she couldn't go to school with someone who looked like that. It really hurt me, and I'm sure my sisters felt offended too. The teacher told Katie off for saying all those horrid things, but that didn't stop her from bullying us when there were no teachers around. In the playground, when we ran around playing games, Katie would stick out her foot and trip us, and then she would laugh, saying, "You deserve it, you freak." If you're thinking, why didn't you tell the teacher? Well, we did, but the teacher didn't believe us. Because after that first day of school when Katie first arrived, she had manipulated the teacher into believing she was a golden student. And she was always nice to others, and sometimes even to us when the teacher was there. Like in art class, when the teacher was looking behind us, Katie had said out loud to me, "Sally, I love your drawing." But when the teacher moved away out of earshot, Katie had leaned in close and whispered fiercely, "Monster." When we got home, we never told our mom because we didn't want her to worry. We decided to cope with it between ourselves. But Sophia was always furious. She wanted to hurt Katie, but it took the willpower of the 3 of us to stop her from punching Katie whenever we were around her. One day, Sophia had had enough. She decided it was time we had our revenge. You see, we each share control of half of our body. Sandy and I share the left half, and Sharon and Sophia share the right half. But sometimes, especially with Sophia taking control, she can start to control the whole body. And next minute, we will be going off in the direction that she wants to go in. Sophia had been creating a plan to ruin Katie's life. Little did she know it would ruin ours at the same time. This was Sophia's plan. She was going to humiliate Katie in front of the whole school. Prom was coming up at our school, and everyone knew Katie was likely to become prom queen. Well, Sophia was going to humiliate Katie right as she was getting the crown placed on her head in front of the whole school. She planned to place a huge bucket of slime over Katie, and at that exact moment, she would release it and drench Katie in slime. Then a bucket of feathers was going to be released afterwards, turning Katie into a ball of slime and feathers. When Sophia told us her plan, we were horrified. It sounded terrible. "We can't do that to her," I said. "Why not?" asked Sophia. "Because it's so mean," said Sharon. "So?" replied Sophia. "Katie has been mean to us for every single day of our lives. She deserves a little something in return." "Two wrongs don't make a right," said Sandy. "We're doing this plan," said Sophia firmly. And that's when we knew there was no hope. We had to do as Sophia said, whether we liked it or not. She was going to move us to perform the plan she had described. And so, the night before the prom, Sophia ordered 10 gallons of slime to be delivered to our house, as well as 2 kilograms of feathers. We had to hide it from our mom, so we hid it in our room overnight. The next morning, we managed to sneak out and walked over to the school carrying the slime and feathers into 2 separate bags. It was hard work dragging it all the way to school. Finally, we managed to make it to the school in time for the first bell, and we left the slime and feathers in the storage room. We pushed it into a corner so no one would find it. Throughout the school day, we all felt so nervous. Sophia was mostly excited, but myself and my other sisters were scared. We were doing something wrong, but we couldn't deny the little bit of satisfaction we felt at the thought of Katie getting the revenge she deserved. Sure enough, in history class, Katie started poking us with her pencil and calling us mean names. Each jab was a reminder of how much she made our lives miserable. By the end of history class, we were all ready to carry out the plan. Not just Sophia. When school ended, we all got dressed in our prom outfits and headed over to the sports hall, where drinks and food were already being served and music played. Whilst everyone else went there, we instead went back to the storage room to get our stuff. We got the slime and feathers, got the huge buckets we had already prepared, and headed back to the sports hall via the back route. We found our way to the roof, right over where the stage was, where the king and queen of prom would be announced. There, we poured the slime in one huge bucket and the feathers in another huge bucket. Sandy was quite smart, and she worked out a way to attach some string so that we could unleash the bucket from the back down in the sports hall. After half an hour of setting up, the trap was complete, and just in time, the prom queen was about to be announced. Back in the sports hall, everyone stood in front of the stage in preparation. I spotted Katie, and she glared at me and stuck her tongue out. All I thought was, just you wait, Katie. Next, the teacher announced the prom queen first. And the prom queen is, he said, Katie O'Harry. Everyone clapped, but neither me nor any of my sisters clapped. We had the string gripped in one hand, and we were standing off to the side of the stage, so we had a good look for when the slime dropped. Katie smiled and climbed on stage. She accepted the crown on her head. Thank you, said Katie with her fake grin. I want to thank, but no one got to hear who she was going to thank, because we pulled the rope and the bucket of slime tipped over, spilling its gooey contents all over Katie. She screamed and everyone else gasped. Then they started laughing at Katie. Yes, it worked, whispered Sophia. Next, we moved to pull the string for the feathers, but as we yanked at the rope, something happened. The bucket tipped and became loose, and suddenly the bucket itself was falling. It seemed to fall in slow motion, and then it landed right on Katie's head. Well, that's when everything fell apart. Katie was knocked unconscious. Everyone was screaming and an ambulance was called. Katie had suffered from a hard hit to her brain and was gonna need surgery. When the teachers tried to figure out who had made the trap with the buckets, we had immediately stepped forward and admitted to it. We got in huge trouble. The police were being brought in because we had harmed Katie, and her parents were pressing charges. Her mom was so disappointed, and that's what I regret the most. For the first time, we made our mom feel ashamed of her daughters. In the end, the court ruled that we had been guilty, and we would have to do community service for a year. Everyone at school hates us more than ever now, and we are hoping to move schools soon for a fresh start. We all feel terrible. Katie is fine now. She's perfectly normal. But now we're the ones suffering from the plan. We should have never listened to Sophia, but I guess we're paying the price now. When I was growing up, people called me a tennis prodigy. I didn't know what it meant, but I thought it must be something good because my parents always smiled when they heard it. Oh, Lisa has always loved playing tennis, Mom would reply. It was true. Since the first time I picked up a racket, I knew I was born to play tennis. I never doubted that I was meant to become a famous tennis player one day. That is, until I realized something was living inside my head. But before I go on, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any crazy stories. I remember my first tennis competition like it was yesterday, even though I was actually only 8 years old. That's when people really started to talk about me. I beat all my opponents easily. I felt so happy when they gave me the winning trophy. My parents were watching from the side and I could see them clapping and cheering. From that moment on, my whole life was tennis. I practiced every day after school and all through the weekend. Even when I met my boyfriend Jack, it didn't stop me from spending all my free time playing tennis. Jack understood. He was a keen footballer, so his weekends were busy with the sport too. Mom and Dad drove me all over the country to every competition. I always came home with the top prize. Nobody in my age group came close to beating me. That was until the day I played Anastasia from Russia. I was 15 years old and unbeaten. So when I walked out onto the tennis court and faced Anastasia, I felt very confident. The game began and Anastasia served. The ball came flying towards me at a breakneck speed. I only just managed to hit it. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. I better really concentrate. The game was really close, but in the end, I managed to win. I walked over to the net. "Good game," I said, holding out my hand to Anastasia. But instead of shaking my hand, she just stormed off. That was the first of many games with Anastasia. Each time was just like the first. She obviously really hated me. Our games were always really difficult. She was a good player, but I never lost to her. After our last competition had finished, I went out to find Jack. He was waiting for me in the car park. As I came around the corner, I saw that Anastasia was talking to Jack. This is my opportunity to get to know her, I thought. I walked over to them. She was laughing and giggling at something Jack had said. As she turned and saw me, her face changed. "Hello, Anastasia," I said. "You played really well. It was a difficult game." She just looked straight through me as if I didn't exist. "Bye, Jack. Hope to see you around." She walked off and left me standing there with my mouth open in shock. "Wow," I said. "She is so rude." Jack laughed. "Just ignore her," he said. "She's just jealous of you." The following week, I was sitting in the kitchen talking to Mom when Dad walked in holding the newspaper. "Listen to this," he said. "There is going to be a big tennis tournament at the end of August, and the top prize is $1 million. Can I enter?" I asked excitedly. "It's going to be a tough competition," said Dad. "All the best players in the world will enter. Are you sure you're up for it?" "Definitely," I said. I began to dream about all the things I could do if I won $1 million. We could go on a holiday abroad. Jack could come too. I'd always dreamt about going on an exotic holiday. I would need to practice even more now. I would get up at 6 a.m. and have a lesson every morning before school. The next morning, I woke up to my alarm ringing and dragged myself out of bed. I met my coach Mike at the tennis court and started my training. "You are a brilliant player, Lisa," said Mike, "but you will be going up against the best in the world. You really should think about attending a summer camp for tennis." Mike showed me a leaflet advertising the next summer camp. This was just what I needed, 2 weeks of intense tennis lessons. "I'll ask my parents about it," I told him. When I got home from school that afternoon, Mom and Dad were sitting in the lounge. "Hi," I called as I walked through the front door. "I've got something to show you." I handed Dad the leaflet and waited whilst he read it. "Please, can I go, Dad?" I pleaded. "If I want to win this competition, then I really need to go to this camp." Thankfully, Mom and Dad agreed to let me go. I was so excited. I rang Jack and told him all about it. At first, he was a bit upset that I would be away for 2 whole weeks, but eventually he agreed that I just had to do it. "I'll miss you, Lisa," he said. "I'll miss you too, Jack, but I promise I'll call every day," I replied. The day of the summer camp finally arrived. I put my suitcase in the back of the car and waved to Mom. Dad was driving me to the camp. It wasn't a long journey. The camp was only about an hour from home. When we arrived, I went into the registration room and gave the lady at the desk my name. "Go find your name on the board," she said. "I will tell you who you are sharing a room with." I went over to the board to see. There was already a crowd of people looking for their name. Eventually, I got to the front and looked for my name. "I don't believe it," I said worriedly. There, next to my name, was my roommate's name, Anastasia. Of all the bad luck, I was sharing a room with a girl who hated me. Well, this was going to be fun. But when I went to my room, I got a surprise. Anastasia was there waiting for me, and she had a big smile on her face. "Lisa," she said, "I was so happy when I saw I was sharing a room with you." Was this really Anastasia? She was being so nice to me. We sat on our beds chatting like old friends. "You're so lucky, Lisa," she said. "Jack is a fantastic boyfriend. You can just see that he loves you so much." "Yes, I really like him too," I said shyly. The next morning, our coaching began. My game really improved, and I was winning all the matches. At the end of the first week, I had a match against Anastasia. We had been getting on so well all week, I really hoped it wouldn't change if I beat her. I played the game perfectly and beat Anastasia quite easily. When I went back to our room, I was a bit nervous. Would Anastasia be annoyed with me? But when I walked in, Anastasia just smiled at me. "No hard feelings," she said. "I know we haven't always got on, but I really like you and I want us to be friends. I've made you my special hot chocolate drink and some popcorn. Let's watch a movie." We sat down and watched the movie. I took a sip of the hot chocolate. Ew, this is really bitter, I thought, but I didn't want to offend Anastasia. After all, she had been so nice to me, so I drank it. Suddenly, I started feeling really tired. I could hardly keep my eyes open. Soon, I had fallen asleep on the sofa. The next morning, I woke up. I looked around, but Anastasia was nowhere to be seen. She must have gotten up early for a practice game. I went into the bathroom, but just as I closed the door, I heard a voice say, "Hello!" I was shocked. I looked around me, but couldn't see anyone. "Who's there?" I said. "It's me," said the voice. Is there some creep watching me? I thought in panic. Get out! Get out, whoever you are, I said. "This is your inner conscience," the voice said. I looked in the mirror. Wait, what? Is this really my inner voice? I never knew it'd be so clear and real. "Well, get used to it. I'm not going anywhere," the voice continued. The voice sounded so familiar to me. I guess that was because it was my own personal voice. "Why are you here now?" I asked. "People usually get their inner voice when they're 16 years old," the voice inside me said. I went down to breakfast and sat by myself. The voice continued talking, and I replied out loud. I realized that people were beginning to stare at me. They probably thought I was weird because I was talking to myself. After breakfast, I went out to play my first match of the day. I was playing a French girl called Monique. I had seen her play a few games. She was quite good, but nothing for me to worry about. She served the ball, and as I ran towards it, I heard the voice inside me again. "Swing now," it said. I swung my racket, but I missed. Why did I swing the racket so early? There was no way I could reach the ball then. "Don't be too hard on yourself," said my inner voice. "It was your fault," I said. "But I am you," the voice went on. "You can't get mad at me." When the match was over, I went straight back to my room. Anastasia was there when I got there. "Where have you been?" I asked her. Oh, I just had some errands to run," she replied. I told her about how I had a bad day's worth of training, but she just told me not to worry about it. I appreciated her help. The following day was the last day of camp. I packed up my things, I gave Anastasia a big hug, and we said goodbye to each other. "I'm going to miss you," she said. "See you at the big competition. Good luck." As soon as I got home, I called Jack. "Hi, I'm home," I said. "Did you miss me?" "Of course I did," said Jack. "He's lying," my inner voice said. "I bet he's cheated on you." Was it true? Maybe Jack did meet someone else whilst I was away. After all, 2 weeks was a long time. Instead of asking Jack to come over so we could hang, I hung up on the phone and laid down. Mom had made my favorite dinner for my first night back. We sat down at the table and I told them all about the camp. "I can't wait for the competition now," I said. "You'll do amazingly," said Mom. "Yup, you've got this, Lisa," said Dad. "We're so proud of you." "Why are they pushing you so much?" said my inner voice. "I bet they just want to get their hands on the $1,000,000. They don't really love you. They're just using you." I wondered whether my inner voice was right. Maybe my parents were using me. Maybe that's why they always pushed me to join all these competitions. I stopped talking and was moody for the rest of the night. The day of the competition finally arrived. It was being held at a huge stadium in the center of the city. Lots of famous people would be there, and the security was really tight. As we entered the building, we had to walk through a metal detector. Dad went through first, then Mom. As I walked through, there was suddenly a loud buzzer sounding and lights flashing. Within seconds, I was surrounded by the security team. "Come this way," they said seriously. "We need to check you for any hidden metal." They took me into a room and told me they would be taking an x-ray of me. After they had taken the x-ray, they told me to wait as someone needed to speak to me. What was going on? I knew I didn't have anything hidden. A few minutes later, the head of the security team came into the room. "We have found something on the x-ray," he said. "It appears you have an audio device in your ear." What was he talking about? He got some tweezers and took something out of my ear. "What? How did that get there?" I cried out in alarm. "I think someone has been trying to control you," he said. So that's what's been going on. I suddenly realized I didn't really have an inner voice. Someone had been talking to me. But who would do that? "When did you first hear the voice?" he asked. I tried to remember. "It started when I was at the tennis camp," I said. "I fell asleep watching a movie with my roommate, and when I woke up the next morning, I heard the voice." He told me that he had an idea on how to find out who was behind it. He put the device back inside my ear. "We will put a tracker on the device, so the next time you hear the voice, we can trace where it is coming from." It wasn't long before I heard the voice. "You're not ready for this competition. You haven't practiced enough," it said. I nodded to the security team and they started to trace the signal. A few seconds later, they gave me the thumbs up. They had found where it was coming from. The signal was coming from inside the building we were in. I followed them as they led me through the building. Ahead of us was the door leading to the changing rooms. We burst through the door, and there, sitting on the bench, I saw Anastasia. She was talking into a microphone pinned to her shirt. "I knew it was you!" I shouted. "I knew I had heard that voice somewhere before." Anastasia was shocked at first, but then her face contorted with rage. "I hate you!" she shouted back. "You don't deserve to win. I should be winner." "But how did you do it?" I asked. "Don't you remember the night I made you the hot chocolate? Well, I put a sedative in it, and when you went to sleep, I planted the device in your ear." "Well, the joke is on you," I replied. "I have all this recorded." I pulled out the microphone I had hidden in my pocket. "I'm telling the tennis competition board exactly what you have done." Anastasia's face fell. She knew there was nothing she could do. She had tried to sabotage me, but I had beaten her at her own game.